We're going to begin our last session here soon. Hopefully you found the breakout sessions useful, and you can see some of the cutting-edge work that is incorporating a lot of the science into these types of interventions. Welcome, Ming. Thank you. Yes, you're at the end there. Yes, yes. We're going to conclude our afternoon with this illustrious panel. I'm happy to say these are good friends of mine and who've been very supportive of our work here at CCARE. At the far end, many of you interacted with Ming at his Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, or SILI. This is like the man from U.N.C.L.E., right? SILI. Ming, as many of you know, was one of the earliest engineers at Google, and through his own interest, decided to see if he could make it, if you will, a more compassionate workplace, and spent a great deal of time interacting with scientists and a variety of contemplatives to understand what processes are necessary to bring forth a good or excellent working environment that incorporates many of the things we've been talking about today. And an outgrow of that was Search Inside Yourself. Ming has been a dear friend of mine and CCARE's pretty much since its inception. He's one of our key benefactors and patrons, and I would just like to again personally thank him for that. Sitting next to Ming is Scott Kriens. Scott is the chairman of the board of Juniper Networks, which creates products and technologies for the world to successfully network, working with some of the largest companies in the world, a very successful company. Scott has been the CEO and very much was responsible for turning that into an amazing organization and one of the leaders in networking technologies. And he continues as the chairman of that organization, which employs, almost 10,000 people now through over 40 countries. And the other thing Scott is very much interested in is mindfulness and how to improve yourself with self-reflection and using, again, many of the techniques that we've talked about today. And through that, he has started a foundation called the 1440 Foundation, and supports a number of programs in this area. Next is my friend Chip Conley. Chip is famous on a number of levels, and he'll tell you that himself. No. I'm just kidding him, of course. So Chip is a dear friend. He is the founder of the Joie de Vie hotel chain, which, is it correct? It's the second largest boutique hotel chain in the... Right. He started that out of a small, is it motel or hotel or no-tel?
No-tel
hotel in the Tenderloin. How many years ago? 20-some years ago?
26.
Yes. And Chip has been a seeker and very interested in how do you make the corporate environment a place where people want to be. And if any of you have seen his TED Talk, you'll be inspired by the type of work that he does. Also, both actually Scott and Chip, and I'm going to get Steve to do it next, but there's a thing that I do at least once a month, usually called Conversations on Compassion. And unlike the empiric science side of the house of CCARE and the interventional side of CCARE, we also have an educational side. And in this context, the Conversations on Compassion are a dialogue just between myself and an individual who, by their actions, exemplify compassion as they are as individuals, or their actions and what they do in life. And it's really fascinating to interact with these people because first of all, that format allows them to really engage in an authentic conversation. And I think people have a public persona oftentimes, but what people are really interested in is what are the drivers that brought somebody to where they're at, where they're engaged in these types of behaviors or interested in that. And so it's really a joy to interact with these individuals on that level. And then, of course, Steve Luczo, who gave his wonderful keynote address this morning. It was really quite inspiring to see what Seagate has done, and you can see how even in the context of a situation where most people would not have gotten involved, as an example, what he was talking about with Northern Ireland at the time, but they took the risk and the profound benefit that decision has made on society, and looking at it as to what we can do to benefit a particular area or situation, and be compassionate and have an understanding of, if you will, bringing out the best in people. And I think that award that was given to him by John Hume was a quite powerful statement of that. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to sit down here and stop talking. Starting at the far end, each speaker is going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes, or till when I tell them to stop, and just about themselves a little bit, about why they're here, what about this area has inspired them or motivated them. And then I may ask one or two questions, but really it's going to be open to you all to ask questions that maybe you have about either some of the presentations they're made, about who they are, what are their drivers, or questions that they have indicated to you through their own experience and have implemented in their own organizations, which might be of interest to the rest of us as far as how we might implement change in our own organizations. So again, thank you, and we'll begin now. Ming?
Hello, everybody. Okay. My name is Ming. I'm the Jolly Good Fellow of Google. I have one of the coolest job titles in corporate America, right? Jolly Good Fellow. I also have one of the coolest job descriptions in corporate America. My job description has only 7 words, which are enlightened minds, open hearts, create world peace. That is my full job description. And as you can see, I've been lazing around, not doing anything. And I wrote the job description myself and I presented it to my manager, expecting to be laughed out of her office. And she was like, okay, approved. I was like, really? So that's what I've been doing. And you may ask how I ended up with such a cool job description. It started with a very small, humble, simple wish. All I wanted to do was to create the conditions for world peace in my lifetime. That was all. And it started in 2003. So I joined Google early. I joined Google in the last century. That's how old I am. I only look young, you know, the result of meditation. And so like you. Where was I? Oh, looking young, yes. So I joined early, and in 2003, I was already a veteran Googler. I was a 3-year-old Googler. And I was taking a walk outside of the then Google campus, which was by then a cluster of small buildings. And during the walk, I had that moment of clarity where I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Or rather, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, I wanted to create the conditions for world peace in my lifetime. World peace in my lifetime. That was what I wanted to do. And of course, I wasn't going to succeed, right? But it's so important, somebody has to fail trying. And I was going to be that somebody who's going to fail trying. So that was my aspiration. And I knew that was what I wanted to do, and I never turned back after that. So that leads us to a question, how? How do I create the conditions for world peace in my lifetime? And I figured it out. I figured out the way to do that is to scale inner peace, inner happiness, and compassion worldwide. Because if these 3 qualities are worldwide, then we have the conditions for world peace. And there's something about these 3 qualities. They are linear. They have a linear relationship. I think that compassion, global compassion, will be the trigger for world peace. However, compassion is not sustainable unless it's built on the foundation of inner happiness. However, inner happiness is not sustainable unless it's built on inner peace, which is why there's these 3 qualities in that order. So I told myself, this is it. I have to scale this worldwide, then we create the conditions for world peace in my lifetime. Simple as that. And then it leads us to the next question. which is how. Right? It keeps getting harder and harder, that one-word question. How do I do that? I figured it out. I figured out the way to do that is to align those goodness qualities with success and profits. Because if I go around trying to spread goodness, goodness will not stick. Yeah, they just think I'm somebody from San Francisco or something, or Berkeley. Right? Oh, that's nice. Now move along. Nothing to see here. You know. However, if I'm not talking about goodness, I'm talking about success, your next promotion, your company's bottom line. And oh, by the way, we also create world peace. Then you spread. So the only way I can think of how it's going to work is success being the centerpiece and world peace being the necessary and unavoidable side effect. That's the only way I know how to do this. How do I do that? I figured it out. The way to do that is to create a curriculum for emotional intelligence. Because EI is pre-marketed. Everybody knows EI is good for my career. EI is good for my bottom line. If my team has emotional intelligence, they're going to work so well. And nobody knows how to train it. And then I figured out it can be trained in a way that also necessarily promotes goodness. Then all I have to do is to create this curriculum in Google. Once it's successful, bring it out to the world, then we have the conditions for world peace in my lifetime. And that's what started me on the journey, and that's what I've been working on ever since. That is all. Thank you.
That you have to go next.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything actually. That's and it's. I actually want to talk maybe about something a little bit certainly related, but a little different, which is how I came to be interested to be able to spend the time with all of you and be here with this group. For me, it actually didn't come in perhaps a conventional way, in the work setting at least. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Chip. It was in part a personal trauma, a loss, my father's loss, which paused me in a way that nothing ever had and made me ask some questions I never asked. And that's a story all its own. But as it came back to the setting in the work world, the challenge I was having was trying to figure out what to do at this company as it grew that was going to be impactful. Because, and this was around 2005 or 6, the company had a couple of $1 billion of revenue and several thousand people, and I was sitting there one day thinking there's really very little I can't go make a product decision or close a deal that's going to move those needles, and if I could, something else is wrong because other people equally smart are working on that every day and ought to be better at doing that. So what can I do? And the answer to that was leadership development. And the thing that I came to learn about that was that people don't follow leaders because of what they say. They follow them or not because of who they are. And therefore, the first responsibility is to share that. And so my center in this conversation is around authenticity. We all lean in to an authentic relationship. And my definition of authenticity is when someone's sharing something that they believe, that's what I would call, and it doesn't matter what the other person thinks of it, or that's not their reason, that's authentic. And inauthentic is when someone's sharing something that they want you to believe. And there's a very natural condition that occurs when that happens. Malcolm Gladwell calls it a thin slice. We take a thin slice of that and we lean back, we lean away. And alternatively, when someone's truly sharing something that's authentic and that's what they really believe, we lean into that. And so, so the beginning of a journey to try and understand what constituted leadership development or the pursuit or the practice or the belief in it was that it really centers around authenticity. And what manifested itself in 1440 and in the work that's kind of continued is that I actually have come to be convinced it's the center of all life and all relationship begins with being authentic, which is kind of easier to say than to do because it requires self-awareness. And at least I'll say personally, I spent the first 45 years of my life trying really hard to be the person that I wished I was. And that was going to be terminally unsuccessful. And because of the sort of traumatic reset and asking instead what was worth spending time on, since it wasn't what I was doing, it's what moved me over to this path. After that, it became really, or maybe it's just the lens I've been looking through ever since, there's lots of applications of this that turn out to be enormously important, in my opinion. In the work setting, or in any setting, if you put a group of people together, of more than one or two, the chances of your path to success being a function of finding 10 or 20 or 100 people that are smarter than your competitors' 100 people are zero. Maybe you can be one person smarter than another person, but you can't find 100 people smarter than the competitor's 100 people. So why would one team of 100 win competing with another when they're equally smart? Well, one reason is if you build trust in the culture and in the relationship, then that team in that culture is going to iterate faster because they're going to learn faster, they're going to share mistakes, fears, doubts, failures, learnings, and they're going to iterate faster than the team that hesitates and withholds and leans back and away from those relationships. And so I forget who said this, it wasn't me, somebody has said more famously, trust has economic value, and that's one of the ways, because trust in a team or in a culture allows you to share more openly, to trust more easily, and to iterate and learn more quickly. And so 100 people won't be smarter than somebody else's 100 people, but 100 people can learn faster than somebody else's 100 people. And in my experience, and in coming to spend more time just trying to think about it, this is just one of the ways that I believe that becomes possible. So I want to hand the time over to my colleagues and allow us to hear from all of you. But I guess my main opinion or thing I wanted to share with you is that this thing that we're talking about, whether you put the label of compassion or empathy or care or authenticity or trust, or there's lots of labels that emanate with similar surroundings. But my belief is, and my experience with it is, there are enormously tangible, substantive, real, valuable things that happen when this gets carried out into the world that make it far more than just, as Ming said, a nice thing. It's, as I'm sure you all know, and just here perhaps to reiterate, it's very, very real. So I appreciate all of you being here to share your experiences with it as well. And let me put that in your hands, Chip.
Thank you, Scott. So it's like a homecoming here. First of all, seeing Steve. Steve and I went to business school together in the same class.
1926?
Yeah. And I also went here undergrad, so I was here for 6 years in a row. And what I know about that era of my life is, and the interesting arc to today is, I could sort of say I've gone from competition to compunction to compassion. And for those of you who don't know compunction, it basically means moral regret. And I think that for me, when I was at business school with Steve, I came straight into business school here, and so I was very competitive, very ambitious, started a company a couple years out of business school, Joie de Vivre. And while the mission of the company was very thoughtful, creating joy of life, I was very competitive in my instincts. And over time, I started to feel compunction. And compunction is a word that really speaks to the idea that you have moral regret about something. The moral regret I had was that I could see that the workplace that I was creating, as much as I was trying to foster joy of life, I could see that people would go home with what I like to call an emotional fist print. We're very good at calculating the environmental footprint, but we're not very good at calculating the emotional fist print of how people feel after a day in the workplace. And I started getting fascinated with what kind of emotional toll we were taking on our housekeepers and our bartenders and our massage therapists and our servers in the restaurants. And it wasn't until the first of two downturns that we've experienced here in the Bay Area, the dot-com bust. We've had two downturns in the last 10 years here, the dot-com bust and then the Great Recession. And each time I have gone to a Jewish shrink to solve my problems. Neither one of them was living. The last one, it was Viktor Frankl, and I'm not going to talk about Man's Search for Meaning today, but that was really what got me through the Great Recession, that book, Man's Search for Meaning. But the first one was, in the dot-com bust, it was Abraham Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think the most neglected fact in business is that we're all human. And it's sort of forgotten along the way, but it's sort of fundamental as well. And it's not surprising that a humanistic psychologist like Abe Maslow with his iconic hierarchy of needs would have an impact on me at a time, frankly, in 2002, when our company was, we had 21 hotels around the Bay Area. We were the largest hotelier in the Bay Area. We had no hotels outside the Bay Area. And we did not have deep pockets, and everybody thought we were going to be the goner in the downturn. And we turned to Maslow, partly because what Maslow helped me to understand was human needs. And this is something that we forget a lot about in the workplace. Not just the human needs of our employees, but the human needs of our customers, and amazingly, the human needs of our investors as well, because some of our investors were human. Not all of them were, but some of them were. And in the process of taking that 5-level pyramid and distilling it down to 3 levels, basically the paradigm of life, what I call the transformation pyramid of survival, succeed, and transform. Because if you think about just about anything in life, it fits into that paradigm. Survival, succeed, transform. You could have this conference could have been a survival conference and you just got the basic needs met. You could have had a successful conference, or you could be leaving here today rather transformed by the experience. Unfortunately, most American business gets very fixated at the success level. And we use that paradigm of survival, succeed, transform to understand the needs and try to be compassionate to the needs of our employees, our customers, and our investors. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to summarize about how we learned about that for employees, not talk about the other two. I'll be very brief. So survival for the employees was money. It's true anywhere in the world. The success need was recognition, because the number one reason people leave their jobs in the US is not because of money. In fact, that's the 4th most likely reason a person leaves their job. The most likely reason a person leaves their job is because of their boss and feeling a lack of recognition. And at the top of the pyramid, the transformational need, the self-actualizing need for employees is meaning. And especially in bad times, is how do you find the meaning? So money, recognition, meaning. That's how I became a more compassionate CEO, and that's how we built, frankly, a business model around compassion and trying to reduce the emotional fist print. What we learned in the process was that in creating that model and teaching it to all, at that time, 3,500 employees in the company, including the housekeeping staff and everybody. So we learned that we created something that Abe Maslow late in his life was on Sand Hill Road, not hanging out with venture capitalists, because the venture capitalists hadn't gone to Sand Hill Road yet, but there's a company called the Saga Corporation, and he studied Saga late in his life. And one of the expressions he used in studying organization was psychohygiene. He said great leaders and great companies create great psychohygiene. And that's what I learned from this exercise of applying Maslow to organizations, is that if you get it right, and Scott sort of spoke to it, if you get it right, you really actually create a great psychohygiene. And what do you get from that? You get the trust, and you also get something that happens in rowing. In rowing, I don't know, anybody here do crew or rowing? So there's this expression I've heard, I don't do it, but, but I've heard about this, that they call it swing. When people are rowing and people are in unison and everybody is on purpose together and there's something that's driving them together, this phenomena that's weird for physics that happens is bizarre. The boat starts to lift out of the water. Not completely, obviously, but it's riding higher in the water. And when the boat's riding higher in the water, there is less friction. And when there's less friction, you move faster. And that's what we did. And we ended up tripling in size between 2001 and 2007. We got the second best award in the Bay Area for employee satisfaction after that guy's company from the San Francisco Business Times. And in 2010, we won the award for the J.D. Powers Award for the best customer satisfaction of any upscale hotel company in the whole country. So something works. Compassion works. Compassion can be a business model that creates success, and more importantly, it creates transformation. So, thank you.
Has it easy.
I'm in a show and tell mood today, apparently. First, I'm going to ask Scott and Chip to stand up along with me real quickly. Now,
there's a
if any
uniform.
of the leaders have outfits like this on, and you can tell why Ming's at Google. The other thing is, I hate to put you on the spot, but was that a Hello Kitty camera case thing?
Yeah.
That is fabulous. Can you show that to the crowd? My daughter would go crazy over that. You're gonna have to tell me where you got that thing. I'm a much simpler person than these guys. I just did what my grandma and my dad told me to do. My grandmother was very influential in my life, and well, first of all, she was the only person that I know, well, other than my children they're young enough not to have gone off path yet, but who lived her whole life, and I never heard her say anything bad about someone else. She actually was that person, and she also just said to be nice, be honest, and work hard. And my father, he used to always say, just stick up. He said stick up for the little guy, but what he meant was always help those in need. And so I was fortunate to enter into the world in a support system that it just became part of my core. And what happened to me later was, as I achieved success, quote unquote, as defined by mostly other people and different perspectives at different times, it can mean different things. But randomly, I seem to be pretty good at a lot of things. People started asking me about, why was I successful? What was my path? What was my plan? And they'd be really disappointed in a lot of my answers because it was like I had none. I just worked hard. I was honest. Do what you love, which parents love that. When I used to go to University of Colorado and tell people, if they really didn't like math and science and they cared about music, they should go in the music program. Then I get the letter from the parents. I hope you hire my kid when they graduate with a music degree. But it got me on this path where I started doing a lot of thinking, like Scott did, around leadership. And I spent a long period of time trying to dig inside about what it might be about some of my personality or bonds that allowed me to be an effective leader in a wide variety of situations. And I have a whole separate speech on that. But it did come down to trust and respect. I broke the word into leadership, and the E and the R stood for earned respect, and it's the fulcrum of the word. And the only way that you can earn respect is to show respect, and the only way you can show respect is to trust someone. And the only way people trust you is if you have a consistent code of conduct. And so then it got me into a new phase of thinking, which was around ethics and philosophy. And not philosophy in today's interpretation of the word of, why do we exist, but in the ancient word of how do we exist. And, it's really funny that philosophy, is something that 1,000 years ago we would all discuss regularly. And of course today you have to be really, really smart and read lots of books to even begin the conversation of what's your philosophy. And I'm a big Roman history buff, which drags you into Greek history every once in a while, but it got me looking hard at some of the strengths of the Roman era and some of the basics of different philosophies, and I got pretty deep into Stoicism. And one of the, I'll contend, myths around Stoicism is that people like Marcus Aurelius had no room for compassion, which I totally disagree with. So I've been on the path now for the last year and a half of basically reading as many translations of meditations as I can, and then cross-correlating that with as much work as I can about compassion to show that actually there are threads, very significant threads of compassion that are intertwined into the ethical discussions around Stoicism that influenced a large percentage of the population back when things were sometimes better and sometimes worse than today. And somehow that led me to Jim, and that's what my path was. So I'm done.
I guess all of their paths led over to this direction at some point. Well, it's actually interesting how there's so much overlap in regard to the comments by these individuals. To really sort of get it, you have to be self-aware, you have to spend the time on introspection. And it's interesting because if you look at Maslow's triangle there, and Chip did you make it into three? I couldn't remember your three, so I made it into three S's, which is the bottom one is security and survival, the middle one is success and social, and then the top one is self-actualization. So I can remember the three S's. But it's interesting because the place, it seems to me, where fear and anxiety live are at the bottom too. And that's where people struggle so much. But once you, and I'm not saying all your problems are solved when you're self-aware or you're insightful. What I'm saying is you're much better able to cope with the reality of life, which is these ups and downs and stressors, but you just respond to them in a different way. I think that's really what the point of our discussions have been today, is really to look at how people are looking at these problems and also get a sense of what others, how they've incorporated much of this research in many ways on an intuitive level, but also based on the science as well, and to see the different paths these extraordinary leaders have taken in their own lives, and to give you some insights into sort of how they've gotten there. What I would love to do is to have individuals from the audience ask questions of our panelists, or potentially even some of the others who have spoken. I can't imagine there's nobody who has a single question. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Scott. You mentioned 100 people that you have that are trusting each other, and another 100 of the people in competition. Can you imagine the world where these 200 of people would trust each other also?
I think so, and it's in part it's because of a personal belief about compassion. And it comes from maybe one step back, which is I have no proof. This is just a noetic belief, just something I believe to be true. I think we all share a common source and origin. I don't pretend to understand it. It just seems true. And then we manifest into apparently individual existence, but in reality it's not. And so compassion is a completely natural instinct. So for me to care about you is not any more than an extension of the natural care I have for my own well-being. So I think this pursuit of compassion, it's not about learning it. It's kind of the chipping away of the stone around it, and the stone is fear that gets piled in between us and the natural instinct to be compassionate. And if we just stop trying so hard and let what is in there naturally manifest in the same way that we care about our own selves, we'll all care in that way about each other. The challenge of it, and one of the frustrations in this field, I won't say this field meaning compassion, but just in the pursuit of world peace, is it's very easy to stop at the observations of what would be great if it were true, and then not work on what Ming's working hard on, which is, well, how do you make that true? And that's a longer discussion. I won't monopolize our time to entertain, but I do, and I'm sure we all think about it a lot. But the thing we're trying to have happen is a completely natural, self-resident instinct that's already there. We're just trying to help something that already wants to happen. And that's enormously easier than trying to invent something. So it seems eminently possible.
You know, it's interesting because whenever you see a major disaster occur, whether it was 9/11, whether it's the hurricanes, earthquakes, everyone drops all pretenses, becomes human, and all the fear is gone, and they all reach out to help another. And isn't that amazing how it happens like that too? And then suddenly, as soon as things have stabilized, they all run back. And you know, they have their fear-driven behavior. But really that is the goal, is how do you get people beyond that to have these types of authentic interactions and continue to manifest that compassionate behavior. And I think it really touches on what Scott had said earlier about authenticity. You know, the challenge for all of us is we put up this mask that we have our act together, that we're really competent, that we don't have any concerns. And of course, when you have that mask, the other person feels they have to have that. So you come together, each in some ways, I think, sort of saying you have your act together. But it's fascinating because, like I give talks, and invariably I'll break up because I'll be reminded of some incident that occurred or something that affected me deeply. And as soon as my voice cracks, everybody starts crying. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. If you can show that you're authentic, that you're perhaps suffering, everybody wants to hug you. And I use that trick all the time. No. We'll go to the next one.
Can I add something to
I
that?
had one thing I wanted to say as well.
Oh, sure.
Go man.
Oh yeah, what Scott says is so important. I want to add on to this. Can we do a very small 5-second experiment? So for 5 seconds, randomly identify some other human being in this room and just think, I wish for that person to be happy. Don't say, don't do, just think. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, thank you. What do you notice? You notice you're all smiling, right? The act, even just the intention, the thought of being on the giving end of kindness is intrinsically rewarding. And I think it makes sense. I think that because we're ultra-social creatures, we're the only ultra-social mammal outside of naked mole rats, there has to be neurological mechanism to create those conditions. And I think this is the mechanism, that wishing for other people to be happy makes you happy. Therefore, if what I just said is true, there are 2 important implications. The first implication is that you just found an inexhaustible source of happiness. Because all you have to do is to wish for other people to be happy, and you'll be happy. And there's a second very important implication, which is relating to what Scott just said, which is, if this is true, if kindness and compassion are self-rewarding mental states, then there is no effort. Then our work, right, trying to potentiate compassion in the world is easy. Because it is fun, because compassion is fun. So all we have to do is to latch onto that insight, that one insight, that compassion is fun, and then make use of that. Then the whole world will be compassionate.
Meng, it's hard to follow that, but I actually have a homework assignment for you, and it relates to Google. Go home tonight, go to Google, look at images, and there is a rock formation in Japan that some of you may have seen before of two rocks with a very large rope that actually is connecting the two rocks. Has anybody ever seen that before? Okay, maybe about 4 of us. Okay, so it's gorgeous. It's quite beautiful. What's fascinating is these two rocks. One's supposed to be the male, one's supposed to be the female. When it's low tide, what happens? You actually see that the rocks are connected. They're two beautiful rocks. It's aesthetically stunning. And when it's low tide, you actually realize, and this relates to what Jim was talking about, low tide being bad times. In bad times, we actually realize that these two gorgeous rocks are actually connected at the root. And when we were going through a very difficult time in my company and with the top collection of people all warring with each other, I brought that image in, and then and I said, what do you see here? And it was just the first image with the tide out, and it was gorgeous and beautiful. And one of the people said, well, we want our boutique hotels to look like this. And I said, yeah, but that's not the point. And then I showed the next image, which was the rocks connected. And that was one way of helping our leaders realize that we were all connected, just like these rocks were. And I just think the more you can get metaphorical in your leadership, the better. Because when you actually go too literal with things, people have their own, their mind's already made up, frankly. That's the problem. So going metaphorical, I found to be very helpful.
My question follows along this sort of thinking in the broader human vision and recognizing our humanity and the deeper transformation. And my question is, we've been talking about how compassion can make teams and organizations more cooperative and more effective. And I would be interested to know if the organizational culture can transform them in a deeper way that then impacts their communities. In other words, could a company that can cultivate this compassionate community actually make a difference in the political tensions in their community or the religious tensions? Can it bleed into other parties, or is it just an insider compassion?
Well, the disk drive guy's gonna have a really different answer than the Google guy. I serve on a board with Urs Holtzel, the WWF board, and it's always funny how different our perspectives are on things. But yeah, it's tricky, I think, honestly. I was talking to someone earlier about this, of the role that a corporation can play in countries, let's say, to influence policy around things like human rights or environmental issues or things like that. And for sure, I think to the extent that that you have influence and trust and respect in that country, gives you the opportunity to drive a discussion in a way that you hope is fruitful. But I think the problem with most Americans is that we're really arrogant about our point of view, and we have a lot of problems here in our country that would be nice to focus on. I've talked to a lot of people who've run for president, and I've asked them all to do one thing, which none of them have done yet, which is I said, just go to New Orleans and get in a car and drive from New Orleans to Memphis on the old roads. And if you want to see where we could do some things to help our country, that's all you got to do. Just do a 2-day trip and don't bring any staff with you. And so I think, yeah, companies can do that, and I think most great companies certainly engage in their communities and ask their people to engage in communities and affect change. But it's balanced again against, especially if you're a public company, and if you're a real public company, where like the public shareholders vote versus the non-public shareholders, and I'm being serious though. I mean, the problem is that that's who you work for. And I think, in my opinion, the most enlightened management realizes that that's who you work for, and you have to take the best interest of the company in heart when you make your decisions, but at the end of the day, you also have to respect your shareholders and what they require. And something could be dearly important to me, like illegal wildlife trade is dearly important to me, but that doesn't mean it's important to our shareholders, so it's not my job to direct my company's resources to solving those problems, but I can at least try and use some of the influence that I have in places like Thailand, to have them pay attention to it. My point is, I think it's not an easy answer. I think all of us that are running organizations that have the capability to impact for positive change do so, but I don't think it's as simple as motivating the company to do that. It gets back to the mispricing problem. If things were priced better, then I think it's easier to do that, but I think it's hard sometimes.
I would just say, you know, we're lucky because with hotels and restaurants and spas in various communities, we found that the best way for us to do that is to democratize philanthropy. So the decisions around philanthropy in the company about who we were going to connect with and what we were going to do were made at the property level by the employees, and then they went out and they actually did it. So we had cultural ambassadors at each hotel that actually decided that. So I think the more you can actually democratize that community spirit, the better.
I'll just add one irony that to me is often confused about corporations is that the charter of the corporation, public corporation, as Steve said, that's given to us by Granny and Grandpa, who are actually the shareholders, is that you have to make the absolute most money possible or you're fired. So it isn't, it's as if sometimes in the public, in some circles, there's this perception that Mr. Corporation is putting all the money in their pocket or that they answer to someone else. But the people that own the company give it a very clear mandate, which is you have my retirement at stake and your job is to make the most money possible. And if you don't do that, then I'm going to sell your stock, it's going to go down, you're going to get fired, and you're going to get replaced with somebody who will do that. So this notion that a company has the freedom to be altruistic in the absolute, as if it were the owner of its own equity, is just mathematically false. And it's a different assignment than owners give us. Within that, and we do the same thing that Chip mentioned, is we have philanthropic undertakings that are driven by employees. And that philanthropic community support's really an important part of being successful. The thing that we say inside Juniper is that the primary reason that the company exists is for the success of the employees themselves. And that if we do that, and the reason for that is because it's a false pretense to think that the employees are coming to work for any other reason. So you have this odd contradiction. The company exists for the success of the investors. The participants that populate the company exist for their own success. And that's not wrong because they're trying to succeed to feed their families and raise their children and pay their tuitions for college, to be at places like this and all that stuff. So to pretend that a employee at a company is there because they care more about the customer than they do about themselves is nonsensical. So what we can do, it's kind of a long-winded way of getting to the answer to your question, if we commit to make the employees successful as the highest priority in the company, that's building an authentic, trusted understanding because that's really what's going on anyway. And then the employee says, well, if you're going to do that for me, how can I help this thing that's helping me? Well, I can go home and be a better member in my community. The development and the training and the support that I get in emotional intelligence and other forward-thinking ways of helping employees be more successful and be better makes them better parents, better spouses, and so forth, and it makes the company more successful for the employees. But it's really important, in my opinion, that you call it what it is. And I think there's a lot of very confusing pretenses that make it seem otherwise.
Yes. Hi, I'm aware that compassion has become kind of a hip meme. And what's missing today for me with all the virtues, respect and integrity, is no one's mentioning the virtue of love. And I'm curious, I'm just very curious, what's the distinction and why compassion is hip and love is taboo in business? I haven't heard it today at all.
Oh, well, I don't think so at all. I think love, the business model for our company is in the shape of a heart. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the service profit chain, but it's a Harvard Business School idea that we turned into a heart and we said, that's how we do business. And it comes from the heart and it comes from love.
Yeah. And what is the distinction for you between the virtue of love and compassion? Are they synonymous?
There's none.
I'd love to hear others if they feel there's distinctions.
Well, I opened my comments by saying that one of the things I talked to Jim about was this was a conference on compassion, not on loving kindness. And I think to me the distinction is they're complements of one another, that they aren't necessarily the same. The compassion is the human instinct to take someone else's suffering. You could argue that they need love in their hearts to do that, but to me, they are different, which is why I said there's a tendency for people to mix the words. Goodness, love, kindness is not the same as compassion. Compassion is a different thing. It's reaching into fear. I mean, I think the interesting thing about love's a fun, happy word, because we can either think about what it's like when you embrace your child or your lover, or when your mom or father embraced you, and it's that warm, fuzzy feeling that's wonderful and connects us all. Compassion, though, has that word about helping people who are suffering, and suffering's a tough word. It's like fear. Yeah. And I have a little theory about whenever we've mentioned fear here a bunch. Every day things happen and you get that alarm goes off about fear. You fear. For me, when that happens, I run to the fear. I don't run from the fear. I run to the fear. I go right away to say, wait, what's driving that? Where does it hurt? Why does it hurt? What is it? My old instinct would have been to run like, and get as far away by distracting myself or making a joke or something, or moving on. But instead now I turn and I run to the fear. And I think compassion is a little bit like that. You have to expose yourself to suffering, and exposing yourself to suffering hurts. When you see people suffering, it's not a great thing. And then you have to say, okay, I'm going to reach down and help that person. So to me, it is a little bit different.
Thank you.
I just add one to that. In meditative psychology, there's a very precise definition. Loving kindness is defined as wishing for other people to be happy, and compassion is defined as wishing for other people to be free from suffering. And they're qualitatively different mental states.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My question is really to Chip, but anyone else want to come in? You introduced a concept that didn't show up the rest of the day, and I first of all want to congratulate you on it. I was very grateful to hear the word compunction. And I think that's...
Compunction.
Yes, yeah. I think it's a courageous statement. And I realized I identified with it, but I also realized I'm secretly harboring a hope for a national epidemic of corporate compunction. And it's tied a little bit to your observations about the expectations of shareholders and so on. But there is a larger imbalance issue in the country that I think it's important to say out loud. And the maldistribution of wealth right now is sort of breathtaking. It's the worst it's been since the 1920s. And I think somewhere there's a conversation about compassion in there, and also a conversation about compunction. So I'd like your observations on that.
Wow. I guess what I've seen in the companies that have made major changes in their operating strategies to be more compassionate, or at least more systemic in their thinking, systemic meaning they look at the long-term impact of what they're doing, is it's really been one of two major reasons. Walmart changed because primarily they had to financially, their stock price was getting killed, not because they were not making a lot of money, but because they couldn't grow, because the communities rose up and actually were saying no more, and there were a lot of potential lawsuits. So they shifted as a company, primarily, my opinion, not necessarily because of compunction so much, maybe a little bit of that, but it was mostly because it was actually good business to actually start being a better citizen of the world. The only other way I've seen it happening is when there's a change of leadership and there's a collection of new leaders, or usually sometimes a single leader who says, this is how we do business. And they're looking at the meaning part of that pyramid, that employee pyramid, and saying, we're going to get more out of our reputation as a company, and the people here are going to actually feel that much more engaged if we really take a systemic perspective on how we have an impact in the world. And so, but I don't think shame has worked very well in the corporate world. and I wish it worked better, but it doesn't seem to. So it's usually a financial reason or a moral leadership reason that, frankly, someone can also say has potentially competitive benefits as well.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciated was you didn't put it forward as an issue of shame,
Yeah.
but as an issue of moral
Guilt.
choice.
Well, there's a difference between guilt and shame
Yeah.
as well. Yes.
Yeah, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would, sorry, but even though I'm not ever supposed to talk politics, I would expand the need for compunction, not just amongst our corporations, but amongst our government leadership as well. And when you think about what is that an extension of, again, I just ask us all to reflect that corporations are a reflection of shareholders in the marketplace of which we are all a part. And in our country, our government is a reflection of us. And we're allowing this to happen. We are allowing this to happen. And until we decide that it's not good enough to have some of the things going on in the world today that are going on, it's going to keep going on. It doesn't matter how much a CEO gets paid, and it doesn't matter anything about anything. We are letting this happen, and we have to decide we want to stop it.
So you've answered my question partially, which was about the inherent tension between leadership and shareholder value. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for taking a courageous stand for compassion in organizations. And yet there are times that there is a tension between shareholder value and being able to run a corporation in the way your ethics or your morality or your inner guide would have you run it. So I'm curious if you have any stories or thoughts on times when you as leaders have had to make a difficult choice in that realm. And particularly if you made the choice toward a compassionate organization, how did you language that to the street?
I'm not sure I take the assumption embedded in that, which is that there's a conflict that has to be resolved. I would have taken that presumption some years ago, but I think that the focus on doing the best you possibly can for your employees or for the best interest of this entity called a corporation, I don't construct any longer the condition where you'd have to contradict an investor's intention to do that. And almost think if you found yourself trying to make that decision, it would be more important to step back and figure out why that's the way I was thinking about it or what I was missing. Because somehow doing something that was better for the investors at the expense of the ethically, morally, compassionately correct thing, something's wrong with the assumptions I'm taking into that definition of the problem. And I'd be inclined to step back and not accept that that was the proper way to evaluate the thing that was presenting that conundrum.
Well, if I could, we could dialogue about this a little bit. So let me presuppose a situation, because I'm probably not thinking about it right.
No, this is just this is the disk drive business coming forward.
No, but I mean,
it's a tough business.
No, but I think there's an answer to the question, and I do agree that, anybody that ever got in that position of thinking, should I do what's right or do what's, right for the shareholder, that maybe not what I think is right. Obviously, you quit. But, for example, we were talking earlier about Seagate has a big sustainability issue, effort, where we basically, because of the amount of precious metals that we use in our products, we have to, either just throw that stuff away, or we collect it and we try and reuse it so we don't have to, dig up the earth as much as possible. That cost us a lot of money to do that, and it would be way cheaper actually just to let the stuff go. And over time, our competitors have let it go, which means that they have a lower cost. And so I could go to a customer, I could go to Google and say, hey, Urs, will you spend, give me an extra, 10 cents or 20 cents a disk drive because we're doing this good thing for the world? And the answer would be, maybe at Google would be yes, but at most of our customers historically, the answer would be no. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't still do the right thing. So then what happens is we have higher costs, we have lower profits, and our stock gets mispriced. So what can we do? Buy your stock. So I think when there's these dislocations between what the market says is the right thing to do versus what you really believe is the right thing to do, what that's going to do is it's going to create an opportunity that you can take advantage of and you can correct over the longer term. So I think we get to the same place, and I'm probably just not as advanced in thinking as Scott is, and I mean that seriously, because I've had to keep running a company while this guy's been, see, I was the chairman once too, and got to take, and then they made me come back to work again because I didn't finish my job right the first time. So next time I retire, I'm going to be like Scott and say, no, I'm really going to think about this stuff hard. But I think it's slightly different, but I think the ultimate opportunity is there's a market response which says, then they're mispricing your security and take it.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I was just thinking and reflecting on each of you who are captains in your respective companies who have adopted an attitude and a philosophy that is around compassion. And I'm thinking, is this, compassion is something you can't mandate or legislate. It's something as an individual, as a captain, you feel. It's a feeling. And so within business, there's not a whole lot of feeling going on, but there is as individuals. So you say you have to answer to your stockholders and to the market. How does compassion get introduced to the market, to the market makers, to Wall Street? How is that? Who champions that? The individual epiphanies that come down into the people who run these organizations, or is it James Doty who continues with his work here that brings it to all institutions? Do you guys have any feedback or thoughts on that?
I'll go quick, and I don't want to dominate, but I would say back to the love thing. I love the people I work with. I mean, I truly love the people I work with, and I think it makes us execute better as a team, which I think reflects in higher profits, which I think then shows up in terms of Wall Street either to decide to reward us or not. But I don't think of it as trying to explain to Wall Street why compassion is important. If our team gets it, we're gonna perform better. That's what's going to matter to Wall Street. That's kind of my simple answer.
If there's any good news, it's the Harvard Business Review last year, January, February issue had a happy face on it. And the whole issue was on the value of happiness. And there were 5 articles that showed the empirical benefit to companies from creating an organization built on happiness, which is what leads to success, as opposed to success leading to happiness. And the fact, it didn't speak about compassion, but the fact that happiness is now in the language of business schools, and the Harvard Business Review, which is about as conservative a business journal as they come, is writing about it and having a happy face on the cover, suggests that we're moving in a direction where corporate culture and the intangibles of happiness, reputation, brand value, the things that we couldn't measure so well in the past, are now starting to be more important things for us to measure, and investors are actually starting to factor that in. Well, more thoughtful investors are starting to actually factor that in as they're looking at long-term investments in companies.
I'd also say, at the risk of making a comment about a business Chip built and understands much better than I will, but just because we're all consumers of this, and Chip says this much better in the book, but when you check into a hotel, if the employee that works for the hotel cares about you having a good experience, how much difference does that make? It's enormous. It's the reason to come back. So I think that it emanates, in some cases, if it's more hierarchical as an organization, perhaps it's going to have to emanate from the leader first, but ultimately we all have this responsibility to have it emanate from us. And as it does that within a company, what you get, in my opinion, are people who care. And people who care attract other people. And I only borrow the hospitality example because it's so glaring as it affects all of us. And I think there's enormous value that's derived, and it's not, once again, harder to see sometimes in a more embedded business. What Steve was talking about, when you're embedding a technology, it's not as obvious, it's more subtle perhaps than it is in a business where we interact directly with that employee or that person who either cares or doesn't care. But the principle's still the same in my view.
And I would just mention, and I forgot to mention, Chip has at least 2 books, which I've read. What is it, Maslow's?
The Maslow book is Peak, and the Viktor Frankl book is Emotional Equations.
So I would recommend both of those books. They're really wonderful, and I think they really give you great insight into why Chip's companies have been so successful and why so many organizations are taking great interest in that. Now, I didn't plug Ming's book, Search Inside Yourself, which I guess now I'm committed to plug everybody. But Ming's book is...
Has a copy, see? There.
Yes.
I was just giving him grief, like you don't have copies of the book?
I'm a bad author.
And so Ming's book is also wonderful. And in fact, the launch party for the book, the party was held at my house. So I have to say I enjoyed the book as well. So did we plug everyone who needs a plug here? Yes, young lady.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. I'm wondering, Ming, you work for a company that has the motto, "Don't be evil," which seems like it should be obvious, but also seems like it's quite a challenge often for a lot of companies and organizations. So I'm wondering what ideas or what thoughts you have on how organizations and companies can be mindful and proactive about not being evil, in addition to being compassionate.
There are many points that come into my mind now. I'm trying to figure out which is the most important. So off the top of my head, I think the most important thing is having the awareness and also stating it. Because once you state it, once the CEO and so on say, let's do the don't be evil thing, it creates accountability. Right? And we all the employees hold the CEO accountable for that. So that's one, the awareness and the courage to say it. There's probably a second thing, which may be equally important, which is creating a culture where people can criticize you as in the boss, and they know they're getting away scot-free. Right? And in the early days of Google, it presented itself in a very nice way. And it came in the story of this guy called Amit. So Amit was an engineer, he's an Indian guy, and he's an early engineer. He came before Eric Schmidt, who later we hired as a CEO. So when Eric became CEO, he had a tiny office all to himself, right? Because he's CEO, right? And Amit always wanted that office. So one day they sort of met at the hallway and chatted a little bit, and Amit said, Eric, I always wanted the office. And Eric was just being nice, he was just joking, hey, oh sure, Amit, just come and be my office mate. And Amit said, okay, I accept your offer. And Eric was a little bit in the bind, right, because he was just being nice. So the way he tried to get himself out of the situation is, he told Amit, why don't you speak to Wayne? So Wayne was the VP of engineering. And if Wayne has no problems with you moving into my office, then you can move into my office. So he was expecting Wayne to rescue him. So Amit went to Wayne, and Wayne said, I don't have a problem. So Amit moved his table and his computer into Eric's tiny office. It was like roughly this size. So imagine Amit and Eric, they're sitting next to each other. And every time Eric had an important confidential phone call, Eric leaves the office. And Amit did not get fired. And that arrangement went on for 5 months. So it's a fun story, but it creates a culture or illustrates a culture where there's a healthy disregard for authority. And so once you have that culture of healthy disregard for the boss and the willingness to state we are not evil, we are doing don't be evil, then there's an enforcing mechanism around this. That's it?
Yes, sir.
Well, I am encouraged. It is a great gift to just know that there are global leaders who are addressing the core issues of our humanity with compassion, with intelligence, with humility, with courage. and are willing to just be who they are in the circumstances that they have to deal with, which are not perfect. I believe you know what you're doing, and I believe you have no idea of how much you do.
Thank you.
I'm not sure where the question in there was, but it was excellent, whatever.
Thank you. I hope you're happy because you were the one that I concentrated on your being happy. I really did. It's the blue shirt thing.
I did too.
You did too?
Yeah, did you? That's why that happened.
So I'd like to pose a hypothetical and to go back and think that you're mentoring a student who's getting their MBA and they're getting ready to start a business. And there's a lot of different ways that you could start a business. I could go and take money from somebody else. We could form a community organization. I'd love to hear from you guys. What would you counsel this young entrepreneur in terms of forming their business so that they could have the biggest impact for social change?
Thank you for the segue, because it gives an opportunity to talk about something I think is really important, which, I mean, not that all of this is important, but just something else to add into the mix, which is the power of intention. And so my sort of simplistic advice would be absolutely crystal clear about your intention. And I have a way of understanding intention for me that helps, which is that I think so we are all surrounded by millions of puzzle pieces. And with those puzzle pieces, we can actually assemble almost anything that we choose. The thing that's missing is the puzzle box top. And the problem is that these millions of pieces are parts of millions of puzzles. And so the pieces that we're surrounded by and swimming in are unintelligible and unidentifiable because we don't have a puzzle box top. And so that's the proverbial intention. And so before launching on the business plan, and which is to me the how-to part, it's the what part that's more important. And I believe that if we can, in any endeavor, become absolutely crystal clear, means I think it's this, I'm going to think some more about it, I'm going to reflect some more about it. Yeah, that's it at one level, but at a deeper level, there's another intention being served, and there's one nested within that. When I can get to the really crystal clear puzzle box top, the next day I go out swimming in the same pieces, they'll be identifiable. And, you know, does the universe conspire to serve, and is intention magical and so forth? You know, I don't mean at all to make it mystical or magical for that matter, because I don't think it is. I think it's actually really practical. I think all the pieces you need for whatever your intention truly is, you're in one of the greatest institutions in the world, you're one of the smartest people around, or you wouldn't be here in the program succeeding as you are, preparing to go do the things you want to go do. You have everything that you need. And in many ways, of course, all of us do. That puzzle box top's a really important place to start. And it'll make a lot, in my opinion, make a lot of things possible.
I have one other thing to add. So in addition to the intention, have fun. So it turns out that fun is one of the predictors of the success of a startup. If the founders of a startup, they're not having fun, almost certainly the startup will fail. And so the key here is how to have fun being good. And we talked about this a bit earlier, that kindness and compassion are intrinsically rewarding and so on. So find the key where you can be fun and do good at the same time. Then it becomes sustainable. After you have the intention, of course. Yeah.
We only have time for one more question.
Okay, I want to congratulate all of you on being able to do what you do in the corporate structure you find yourselves in, which brings the question on the benefit corporation and the alternate corporate structure which seems to be emerging. And I probably let one of you explain what a benefit corporation is better than what I probably can, but effectively it addresses the triple P bottom line, profit, people, and planet, and that's enshrined in corporate law as Article of Association. So my question is, how do you see yourselves as running public companies? How do you see your shareholders actually embracing a change of corporate structure? And what do you see the future of the benefit corporation in addressing some of the issues this conference is trying to bring forward?
Yeah, I think we're lagging into it, interestingly enough, on the environmental side, and then hopefully that'll maybe get us closer to dealing with some of the humanity issues. I think it's funny that, with the transition of computing architectures to these things that we call cloud, which is just timeshare 30 years later, but they don't measure it by amount of server or storage or bandwidth. It's actually measured in terms of the power aspect of it. So it's the amount of compute as a function of the power footprint. And so it's actually allowing companies, I think, to more aggressively pursue environmental direction in what they're doing in terms of products and services, even though I think we've always kind of done that. There's a bigger force where people are now saying that green has to be part of the corporate responsibility. And I think as that happens, then it's going to open up a wider door in terms of dealing with some of these other issues. Clearly, for those of us that live locally, all the heat that Apple has taken in terms of their supply chain, whether or not that's around labor laws or other issues, that part of the human equation, I think, has always been part of the fabric of people that are trying to manage your business as well. But I do, like I said earlier in my speech, in my opening comments, I do think there's a trend where finally the shareholder base is demanding it. I don't think that's going to be enough. The marketplace is going to have to demand it. We're going to have some sort of way of looking at our products and deciding, whether or not it was built sustainably or whether or not it was built without, child labor or things like that, and then we can make our purchasing decisions accordingly.
So you're talking about B corporations.
Correct.
And hard for a public company to become a B corporation. And actually, frankly, moderately hard for a private company to shift into a B corporation if its intentionality on the front end with its shareholders wasn't to be one. I don't think we have time today to sort of talk more about what a B Corp is, although you could go Google it and find out more about it. But
bcorporation.net.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, but I think it's worth everybody taking a look at it, because back to the intentionality, if you start on the front end with investors who know you're a B Corp, and it makes a big difference in terms of your ability to continue and use that as the framework for defining success.
Right, so I understand that, I think it's Ben and Jerry, as the division of Unilever, have become a latest B Corp themselves. So there's a big public company that seems to be taking a division and testing that at a divisional level to see where will that go possibly. And to me, I find that very encouraging.
I just want to say a few closing words. It's really been a wonderful pleasure to have you. This really is the first of its kind conference. And if you haven't checked out our website, I think most of you probably have. It's listed there, I think, ccare.stanford.edu. And it gives an overview of all of our programs. We really span, unlike a lot of research institutions, we span multiple disciplines with our work. We're interested in not only in business, we're interested in education, we're interested in public policy. And we have a very broad view of this whole area because I think has been pointed out by some of our panelists. At the end of the day, compassion fundamentally defines our humanity. And until that becomes the forefront of our intent, we are going to be doomed as a species. It's really wonderful that our participants, moderators, panelists have come today to share with us their own knowledge and information, and I so much appreciate that. I also want you to know that CCARE, while we survive on grants, we also survive also on the benefactors whose work resonates with them. So certainly any of you who are interested in learning more about what we do or wish to get involved, please give me a shout. I'm happy to chat with anyone at any time. I've tried to take Adam Grant's give and take recipe to heart. And so on that note, again, thank you. I wish happiness for each and every one of you. Thank you. Thank you.